it's totally good. So, hello again, everyone, and thank you for being here. Thank you on behalf of myself and on behalf of One Art as well. First, I want to say that I'm sorry to inform everyone that Tina Berry, who was supposed to read tonight, is not going to be with us. Tina had a personal emergency, so sadly she isn't able to attend, but we will have Tina back for a future reading. Our featured poets tonight are Betsy Mars, Jane Zwart, and Hayden Saunier. Our first reading is by Betsy. It does feel like I've known Betsy for a very long time, though in reality, it's only been about 5 years, basically since the early days of One Art. Betsy's poem Bearing Water was nominated by One Art for a Best of the Net in 2022. Overall, Betsy is a poet, photographer, and assistant editor at Gyroscope Review. Her poetry has appeared in numerous journals and anthologies. Recent poems can be found in Minyan, MacQueen's Quinterly, Sheila-Na-Gig, Autumn Sky Poetry Daily, and One Art. Her poems have appeared online and in print, one of which served as the Rattle Ekphrastic Challenge prompt in 2019. She has two books, Alinea, and her most recent, which is co-written with Alan Walowitz in the Muddle of the Night. In addition, she also frequently collaborates with San Diego artist Judith Christensen, and recently on an installation mapping Our Future Selves. And I'll put a couple links in the chat. Thank you, Betsy, for being here.
Thank you, Mark, for having me. Yeah, it was such a blessing. I think it was Donna who first told me about One Art, and it's just been, feels like such a great home and such a, it's just constantly a great source of poetry and inspiration. You've been so supportive. Even when you reject me, I always learn from it. So I'm just incredibly grateful to you and Louisa, and I was so happy to have the pleasure of meeting you. And
thank you.
I'm really honored to be here with Hayden and Jane. And I will try not to be too much of a bummer. I had been thinking a long time about what I wanted to read, and then with the last week, I've been flip-flopping a lot, and I'm just in awe of Hayden and Jane's poetry. So I'm glad to go first so I can relax and listen to them and enjoy them. So if you've heard me read before, I always drag this one out. It's a pandemic poem, but I feel like it's really, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I get croaky. I feel like it's timely also. So I'll start with homeopathy, and it's for women, but it's also some certain men can qualify as allies. So homeopathy. I the other silver-haired women in the wellness aisle, pandemic refugees from the bottle. We nod, recognize each other above the masks, the other's once bloodshot eyes. Early on, it took some liquid courage to tell day from night, each day dying, bleeding into another. First, the roots emerged and marked time in inches, dark and light intermingled. Distinguished at last, need from pride, another trapping we shed like bras. What matters above, within, the head, the heart, the liver's overfed. And we're finally sated, or at least resigned, with eyes that smile, endure. We turn to one another, discover cure. And right now, it's definitely, I'm very grateful for the poetry community in general, and for all the women, especially who are, staying strong, and very grateful. As some of you know, I guess I pulled this one out sort of last minute because my cat has cancer, and I have a poem in One Art that was written for him and his brother, and I've been spending a lot of time with him this past week, which has been a nice distraction from other things. But I decided to read this one in his honor. Deconstructing a cat. This was in one art. A pile of paws. See how the nails retract out of the way for daily life, the way they extend in fight or hunt. Thumb hooked, better to grab on. The slinky spine, sharp shoulders high and narrow to slice through grass, deliver a sparrow. Haunches muscular under such fine fur. Eyes like glass, pupils slit in daylight, full moons at night. A tail built for balance, whiskers flick at boundaries, nose a dainty triangle, nostrils twitch at scent. Wrapped around my heart, you chirp. Wrapped around my head, you chirp. Clutch my heart with your kneading, a tiny tiger in my ear, softly breathing. And then this was also in one art, and I guess I don't know how these hang together. Hopefully they'll be cohesive. And I forgot to start my timer, so I'll try to keep track. It's called The Redeemer, and it was Rio de Janeiro, 1964. If you're familiar with it, the huge statue of Jesus above on the mountain above Rio. I lived there for 2 years when I was young, which was a very influential experience in my life. So this is about that time. The Redeemer. From atop the hutch in our rented apartment near Ipanema Beach, a congregation of saints and Jesus figurines attended me. My father gathered these statues here and there. Who knows why? He, an atheist and Jew. Outside, that enormous statue stood above the city, a lightning rod upon the Hunchback Hill, a view of Sugarloaf and the placid bay in his purview. His wing-like soapstone arms encompassed everything, the favelas, me at 5 years old eating fondue in a honey-lit restaurant like a pharaoh. We skirted beggars on our way back home, rats the size of the cat who waited snug and warm, never wanting, basking in the glow of Jesus and his obsidian eyes. And I guess sort of in contrast to that, I want to read this poem because it is relevant and timely. One of my former student that I worked with in middle school was David Hogg, who was at Parkland, and really adored him as a sixth grader, seventh grader, eighth grader, and I'm so impressed with what he's gone on to do. And so this was, about the school shootings, but I think it's also relevant today. At war, you know the drill. Don't go bringing your tired, your poor here. We already have our own huddled under tiny desks, too small for their near adult bodies and psyches, not developmentally ready to grasp the concept of mortality that you live every day in. Fear has entered our classrooms, even in porcelain suburbs by the shore, where their sheltered affluence cannot protect them, any more than their swagger. They're losing their innocence and time to learn from failure under the protection of helicopter parents who can't shield them from the barrage of bullets and news. Darken the lamp, bolt the leaded door. And I feel, with the immigrant issue, the issues with the immigrants too, that's also a timely poem to me. This one was, my mother's birthday was a week ago, and she was born on the day that FDR was elected. And she used to tell me the story about how comforting it was, listening to him on the fireside chats. And so she's been on my mind. She would have been 92 on the 8th. So I've got a couple of poems for my mom. Inside my mother's mind. Inside my mother's mind, there were rooms her mother had decorated like a carnival of doom, mirrors etched with venom. The body that housed her mind was a place her father had built from conditional love and guilt. Any flaws, imperfect nose, a mole, subject to surgical correction. Her body ever on display, staged and scented with perfection. When my mother spoke, there was a guarded space inside her eyes. Sometimes when I was graced, she let me see what cowered behind them. And that was also, I think, in one art. So I'm gonna skip this other one and go on to, my poems are pretty short, so I'm watching the time, but hopefully I'm okay still. At the OBGYN, the doctor spreads a thin layer of conductive gel on the moon-shaped surface of my pregnant skin. The ultrasound wand passes over and detects a beat, the faint first pulse of my new formed boy, the reality of a body within a body finally sinking in. Across the street, my mother lies in intensive care, paralyzed from an attempt to remove a tumor from her brain. I encouraged the surgery. She might never walk again. The doctor reads my tears as joy, and I couldn't say whether he's right or wrong. It's true we're only flies to wanton gods. We lay our eggs, create a buzz, and then we're gone. I know a lot of my poems are, I guess, elegiac or a little, on the morbid side, but I've got some uplifting ones, I promise. This was in one art as well. Flight Path, who painted, no, it wasn't, I think. It was in Minyan. Flight Path, who painted these brushstroke clouds, pushed the leaves skittering along the walkway, made the air loud with ravens on the flyway, who flushed the whoosh from the damp branches above, lit the sky's lamp, warming my back. Who is flying home today? Sirens wailing a final dirge nearby. I guess I'm going to skip my environmental poem. uh, I've got a couple coming out in one art on Sunday, I think, and this is one of them that I wrote fairly recently when I was distraught, even prior to the election. So this is called Peanuts. We all disappoint each other. Nothing goes the way we want. Nothing goes the way we hope. In our secret inner expectation making chamber, we weave our dreams. The elephants in their thick hides, strong tusks circle the calf we are, huddled in the center of everything, eating our lavish grass and lapping at a stream-fed turquoise pool. The herd trumpets our survival. No one breaks rank. Tough gray flanks form an impermeable wall. This is what I want. Is it too much to ask? And I decided that I can't hold it against the elephants, that they're a symbol of the other party. I still love them. So they were a good thing in that vision. I think I'm gonna just read. I don't know how I'm doing for time, Mark.
You're really good on time.
Am I good on time?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have I know these are kind of short. I do want to okay. I'll read this one then, and then maybe one more. And then okay, so this was published recently, and I substitute teach, and I worked in special education for 16 years, and I eventually developed an affection for middle schoolers, although I avoid substituting middle school for the most part now that I'm away from it. But this is called Foxes in the Meadow. Foxes in the meadow. And I know it's spring by the seventh graders trading barbs, drawing penises on the whiteboard, stealing each other's pens or other treasures, testing the limits of their reach. They encroach on each other's spaces, laugh outrageously at anything, embarrassing, their lengthening limbs and hormones always testing the limits of the teacher's patience, balancing their childhood on their bravado, tilting against expectations, just enough, not too much. Their chairs lean back, only two legs holding them to the ground. Sometimes they tip, brush it off, feign tough. They pounce at shadows, play in this meadow, dancing in the in-between. How am I now for time? One more or two more?
You do two more.
Two more. Okay, I am going to go with one of my environmental poems. Sean Kelbley, who was going to read with us tonight, we first met actually because this poem was published in the Rise Up Review, and he liked it, and we had a conversation, and eventually became friends, and that's how I ended up in Ohio all the time. That was my initial introduction to Ohio, and it's called On Board the Pequod, and I had to look up how to say it. I know that was the ship in Moby Dick, which I still don't think I've actually ever managed to read all the way through. The doomsday vault was breached, the paper said, meltwater gaining fast on our food fortress. We'd built walls of blubber, burrowed, stored our seeds for a nuclear winter or early thaw. We'd thought our stronghold under the mountain was impenetrable. We'd dug our moat, drawn up the bridge. Now we cry and fear the urgency of freed water seeking somewhere to go. Whale-like, it breached, breaking the surface, cetacean in its power. It entered uninvited. We're fluked, we thought, and turned on our tails, instantly forgetting allegory and prophecy. We seek revenge on the dominant white whale that we, godless and godlike, have created. Moby Dick consuming us like Ahab, harpooned. We bite ourselves off at the knees. And I sort of feel like that's what we're kind of not like I feel like that's what we're doing as a society, or as in this country. So it was seemed relevant also. And I'll end with seeing Shrek at the drive-in during a pandemic, because I have a lot of fondness for it, and it's a happy poem to me. If you haven't seen Shrek, I highly recommend it and all its sequels. So, seeing Shrek at the drive-in during a pandemic. Ogres are like onions, and I am too, taking off the outer skin for a couple of hours to be close to kin. I peeled my gloves off after the ticket taker hands me a menu for the snack bar, edge away as far as I can from the van they wave me next to, which is spilling laughing children. The dark descends. Shrek slouches before a rising moon. Donkey nearby. I sigh in recognition, alone in the swamp heat of my enclosed car, shutting out the unmasked. In the car to my right, my daughter behind glass, windows up. We communicate by phone and gesture, with thumbs up and heads bobbing to the soundtrack of her childhood. I am trying to atone for all my layers, the rawness, the cutting, the weeping of the onion, the irritants which sear. In the castle, a dragon slumbers, ready to fire up its scorching breath. At night, I assume my true form, hope, that I might be loved anyway. By light of day, I spin candy floss from spider webs, balloon whatever frogs come my way. And thank you. Thank you so much for all of you for being here.
Thank you, Betsy, for that reading. That was wonderful. If you look in the chat, you'll see there's a lot of cat love.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I
It's,
know. Sorry. I know
it's okay.
overdone.
We're happy we've had an extra week and that we didn't expect to have with him. So thank you. He's a sweetheart.
Pam, I see you have your hand up. I don't know if that was intentional. I'm gonna guess it was not intentional. Okay. So thank you again, Betsy. Our next reader, I'm so pleased to have Jane Zwart with us. One Art nominated Jane's poem 2 Points to Final Line for Best of the Net this year, and her poem 13 for a Pushcart Prize in 2022. Jane teaches at Calvin University, where she co-directs the Calvin Center for Faith and Writing. Her poems have appeared in Poetry magazine, the Southern Poetry Review, Threepenny Review, Ploughshares, and One Art. Thank you, Jane, for being with us.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I feel like One Art has been so generous to me in my poems. And yeah, I'm just happy to be in this company. Yeah, feel like I'm punching above my weight. So thank you all. I'm going to read 2 points, define a line to get us started. So yeah, here it is. 2 points, define a line. The conspiracy theorists have this much right. There are strings. I don't mean to indulge their yarns, tabloids plotting Elvis's posthumous cameos, paranoid collages with dead presidents at center, just the yarn itself. I mean just that it's twine all the way down. The underfoot, there are untold filaments, tangled, slack, and that there are not 7 degrees of separation, but 2 points define a line. Think of the rope waiting for the youths who will take sides and straighten it between them, hand over hand, until they are close enough to embrace. Think of the string taut between tin can handsets. You and I, there's ribbon between. I will reel the looseness from it, if you will. Think of the dash, some couple stretch between their 2 surnames. And this next poem is actually a poem that came from being at a online poetry reading and kind of thinking back to the pandemic and when we first started Zooming. And it's actually for Danny Lawless, who edits Plume. He lets me write book reviews for him sometimes. So it is called For Danny, Reading Poems. When I was a kid, only a flu could buy me a screen cubed and populated. In morning, the mugging Bradys, appraising one another above and below, glancing summary judgments through the lattice bordering their blue cells, like a yearbook page come to dubious life. In afternoon, an ennead of actors and comics in Rubik's cubicles, a tic-tac-toe board, 9 rooms, mostly desk. And this is what we thought of when the world got sick. We who, now middle-aged, watched Jan slide her siblings the side eye and Whoopi wisecrack from a grid's center square. It is what we made jokes about, seeing ourselves populate cubed screens. That spring, we subscribed to Zoom and pretended that we too were one thing, a family, a troop. In illness, you do what you must. You build the dollhouse or dormitory a diorama at a time. Tonight I am listening to my friend read poems. Here, it is the hour before dark. There too, a high window turns cobalt behind him, but not everywhere. On the first floor, a man in an apron makes a late supper, his back to an obsidian pane. And on the third is a yellow room, a woman capped in sunlight. When I was a kid, I wished the Bradys would lean past the sashes of their squares and chat across the matrix of that rookery. I wish the Hollywood types would visit, would exit their Kit Kat portraits and cross the shotgun tenement, the game shows set. And for us too, I want this trespass, egress. I want the courtyard our quarters overlook. I want the illicit bonfire lit in the cube of air that belongs to all of us, or none. Thank you. This poem is also from One Art. It is called Cleansing. Yeah. Cleansing. Once it was hyssop for mortals and fire for metals, and then we learned to make soap out of ashes. When that was not enough, we soaked our sheets in sour milk. But life was short and lie was slow. Impatience is invention's other mother. Her son mixed the first bleach. To be clear, blood never fell out of favor. Sometimes, also, we tried forgiveness. And this one is a little longer. It too goes back to one of my students. So I love that little echo with the poems that Betsy read. And yeah, it is also the title of a book I have forthcoming with Orison in fall of 2025. So it's kind of a long title, but I forgive myself because I stole it from my student. It's called Oddest and Oldest and Saddest and Best. My student spends his summers in city cemeteries, clipping the scruff that grows too close to the stones or anywhere the mowers can't go. Sundays mostly, the death-jilted come, some to pledge the stiff with a fifth, some to Windex the pain of granite. Some of those left come to sob nearer the lever, or anyway nearer the dregs that pool in their defector's chest. Sundays, my student stays home. Mondays, he finds the flattened shouldered bottles. He finds a silver pita barely levitating in the cool of the day, bleeding helium molecules. The remnant trapped in the mylar huddles small for warmth. He finds that those who visit the hours he works don't mind the loose orbit the groundskeepers keep around their mellowed grief. He tells me about the priest who lingers after giving a graveside homily heavy on Jonah. The Lord appoints the bush and the worm that attacks the bush. Some of the bereaved, my student says, regain their curiosity. They ask him about the others' epitaphs, oddest and oldest, and saddest and best. Oh, thank you guys. I have a few more, and this one is brand new, and it is about as close as I can get to a political poem without doing the stomping and cursing and so on that Donna described for us earlier. So it's called Poem I Would Not Write. In a perfect world, when babies were not born with blocked tear ducts, the doctors would not explain, he's going to want to be able to cry. In a perfect world, nothing faithful would be awful. So when mothers, not raw from birth, had no cause to coax channels open under the tiny bridges of infant noses, they would not think of the 1,000 ways the world would not make their children weep. In a perfect world, my son would not keen, and I, knowing nothing of bullies or time, would not fail to console him. This too is temporary. Thanks. I have two more, one about each son. This first one is about my son who's lucky enough with his 5th grade class to spend a whole week at the zoo. And they had to observe one animal the whole time, not the whole time, but each day, and make notes about it and all of that. So, and spoiler, he was with the monkeys. So the poem's called Big Scrimmage. All week, my son has been watching the monkeys. A biased naturalist, In a prelude, he writes of his pity for the kids who got pygmy hippo. Under methods, he draws a tail and gives the monkeys names. On the first afternoon he follows, they pick their butts, lol, with a note to ask me what is less than a fight, but more than teasing. When I say, a quarrel, maybe, he says, Mom, they aren't squirrels. On day 3, he unlocks the etymology of monkey bars. At lunch, he trades his banana to a saunterer from Tiger. And then it is Friday, and the class sits down to pen their conclusions. My son writes, mostly, the monkeys remind me of people. Moms lick their hands and wipe kids' faces. My brother sometimes jumps and sometimes lies down on the trampoline. It was a big scrimmage, he writes. They only pretended they weren't keeping score. And this last one for, in part, the other son, you got to keep it even, right? Because that's what we do. So this one is called, I Read That the Moon is Rusting. My son defines time, its river, not its measure, as the way one event changes into another. I am letting what my son knows of time climb and turn a laddered wheel in my mind. I am letting the river run the mill that changes one kind of unknowing into another. Once a student told me that her mother kept vases of flowers long past their prime. She thought them still beautiful, wizened tulips, their petals knuckling into pecans. I read that the moon is rusting. Here on Earth, a breeze kicked up by passing cars fans a dead katydid. Invisible thumbs shuffle, her wings gauzy under things. One event is turning into another. My son grows tall, but is still young enough to trail a hand offhandedly in the current that carries him. There is so little we can demand from time, but I would ask to be like a tulip, a katydid, like the henna-chinned moon, one of those who, done or undone, changes next into another kind of wonder. Thank you all so much.
Wow, Jane, thank you. That was a very powerful reading. And I'm a little stuck on the zoo situation because I'm just now very jealous. That's up there for favorite places. Even though, there's a little bit of controversy around, keeping animals in zoos, but I do love to visit and spend time with them. So, okay, deep breath, and we're gonna move on from zoos, I suppose. But that was wonderful. So last, certainly not least at all, we have Hayden Saunier with us. I've known Hayden for longer than any of the other poets who have read with us today, and that's partly because Hayden is a Pennsylvania poet. I saw Hayden read with Grant Clouser, who is going to be leading an upcoming workshop for One Art. This reading was back in either 2009 or 2010. And that was my introduction to Hayden's work. At the time, I was recently out of college, and Hayden's poetry immediately made an impression and really resonated. Hayden is author of 6 poetry collections, most recently Wheel from Terrapin Books. Awards include a 2023 Pushcart, 2013 Gale Poetry Award, 2011 Rattle Poetry Prize, and 2011 Pablo Neruda Award. Her work has been published in 32 poems, Beloit Poetry Journal, One Art, Southern Poetry Review, The Sun, Thrush, which sadly we're losing.
I know.
I know, right? VQR and Poetry Daily, as well as the Writer's Almanac and Verse Daily. And Hayden, thank you so much for being here.
I am delighted to be here, and really, well, I volunteered to go first, and now I know why, but it's always hard to follow up these beautiful poems, and it always makes me want to change everything that I had decided to read, because I want to read this in response and that in response, and it's kind of one of my favorite ways to do a poetry reading. But I will stick to my, oh, I'm turning on my stopwatch. I will stick to a bit of my plan because I have a new book. So I'm reading from my new book, which is called Wheel. Thank you, Mark. Yes, Mark has been so generous, and I'm so proud of all that you've done with One Art, and I'm just thrilled to be here and reading with you. You've created a tremendous home for so many people, and it's just really a pleasure. And it's a pleasure to see all of these people and to hear and put faces to Betsy and to Jane and to a lot of people that I see here whose work I have read with such pleasure. So I'm delighted to be here. This book kind of revolves around the fact that I moved to, we upsized, our children went off to college, and we moved to a farm, which is like the dumbest thing and the greatest thing ever. So it has become, especially since, 2016, through those years, through the pandemic, it's been a tremendous source of comfort to me. And so this book is really revolves around the cyclical nature of the world and the consolation that offers in these times, as opposed to the hierarchies of men, the hierarchies of people. So at any rate, I read recently, and there are 4 poems in this book called Wheel, and there's the first and the last, and then 2 in the middle. And I read them for the first time kind of as a series, and I really loved doing that. So I want to try to do that again. So that's how I'm going to start. And then there are, I think, 7 poems that were in One Art in this book. So I will read a few of those. So my stopwatch is on. I'm gonna have a drink of water, and I'm gonna jump into Wheel. And each of these poems are called Wheel. Wheel 1, 2, 3, and 4. Brilliant, I know. So I will give a little pause between them. There is a how to it, but not a why. We know enough to know that much, not more. The way tree roots upturned are birds flown into sky, as if the point is to become what we are not. We know enough to know that much, not more. In early spring, our footsteps green the path, as if the point is to become ourselves, and then, in time, become an otherness in early spring. Our footsteps green the path we walk together through tall woods, which is an otherness we will become in time, while everything around us turns and turns. We walk together through tall woods in every season as one rolls into the next, while trees and birds around us turn and green the path we will become in time. The point is to become what we are not. Birds slowly sail through earth, tree roots learn sky. We know enough to know that much, not more. There is a how to it, but not a why. And Wheel 2, the only thing I need to say about this, if you don't know your Hindu gods, which is not necessarily what we all know, Shiva is the god of destruction and creation, and he's usually seen with many arms and kind of hovering with wheels underneath him. He has a snake around his head. And so if you're on a big mower, that's the image that I got one day, and so I ended up with this poem, Wheel 2. Shiva, god of destruction, has taken my shape, or I've taken his, the physics of embodiment being unclear to me, but not to the swallows in tailored blue jackets swooping over the mower as we cut down the pasture, a thick haze of insects and chaff rising golden behind us, making Shiva and me the loud and benevolent bringers of feast, our multiple arms hard at work at the levers, birds binging above us, and the day is a dance between air, earth, and force. The best part is the start, when we make the first turns back and forth with our crown of swift flyers, soft roaring of horsepower, headphone cords snaking our shoulders, the music of spheres in our ears with the whir of sharp blades and hovering circles below. We turn and we turn and we cut, making way for green shoots of new grasses to grow. I watch for fawns breaking from vanishing cover as we chop up their nurseries, destruction, creation, one side to the other, watch them head into wood's edge and vanish. Foxes and vultures and hawks watching too. We don't stop. We don't stop once we've started. We don't stop when the whir strikes a thick mass of straw grass, protecting a warren of rabbits, when Shiva holds firm to the wheel as a terrible fountain of soft gray-brown bodies spews out of the earth, scatters in panic or twitches where they lie on the ground. Shiva tells me time isn't on anyone's side. We are time. We become it each day with our gigantic wheels and our motorized scythes, spinning life into death, into life, into death. And there's no turning back or aside. There's famine or feast, and today is all feast. Swallows circle above us, inscribing this text of the world in the sky. Wheel 3. Yes, I repeat myself. That's what I'm for. Obsession is a turning wheel. Foxes prowl the pasture, stalk fresh cut grass for mice, not from obsession, but design. Because the giant wheels of our newly paid off tractor have just crisscrossed the field, brush hog attached, that time of year. Everything dies. Everything returns, everything repeats itself. Almost the exact same mixture of sea blue chicory and Queen Anne's lace broadcasts its colors in the ditches, small dark eyes skyward. I repeat myself. It's obvious we're all the same. Design may be obsession's other name. And the last. There is a how to it, but not a why. We know enough to know that much, not more, but I repeat myself, that's what I'm for. Obsession is a turning wheel. Fox prowl the way tree roots upturned or birds flown into sky, as if the point is to become what we are not by obsession, but design, because we know enough to know that much, not more. In early spring, our footsteps green the path, the giant wheels crisscross the field, the swallows swoop and dive, as if the point is to become ourselves, and then, in time, an otherness that dies, returns, repeats itself in early spring. Almost the same blue chicory and Queen Anne's lace green the path we've walked together through tall woods, which is an otherness we will become in time, because we are time, we become it, dark eyes skyward as everything around us wheels and turns. Design may be obsession's other name, and I repeat myself, that's what I'm for. We're all the same. We turn around that core as swallows write the text into the sky. There is a how to it, but not a why. We know enough to know that much, not more. So that is kind of the repetitious theme. It was so funny because I had written a poem and a friend of mine said, you know, you wrote another one like this. And it's one of the things I think we do a lot. I feel like I'm writing sometimes the same poem over and over and over again. Maybe to try to get it right. I don't know. But I'm going to switch a little bit to, I'm not going to read, there's a poem in here I'm very proud of, and it did win a pushcart, but it's so hard to read and I just can't read it tonight. It's called Grammar Lesson. It takes you back to the classroom, but instead I'm going to read one that was in One Art that is a little bit of an antidote to the news. It's called Human Interest Story. Last bit of the newscast. A tiny Tinkerbell-sized light lifted from the dank bottom of the jam-packed Pandora's box of horrors just unleashed at us. With shrieking Chiron banners and pop-up advertisements for which heinous true crime story or FBI procedural is coming up. But for 30 seconds, we see puppies rescued from a storm drain, a wedding ring returned to a recent widow after being lost in a Nebraska cornfield for 50 years. And yesterday, a man with one arm paralyzed was offered a simple loop to bind his dead arm to his working one in such a way that he could now raise both arms above his head in a ballerina's O and lift them over his young son's body to hug him back. And I can't stop seeing the look on their faces, lit so brightly from within. It's hauled me through this whole next day on hope. I'm checking my time. I'm going to read two more. This one is for all of us who are, well, you'll see. The wisdom package. I ask the youngish eye doctor why my eyes itch and burn and new floaty bits of paramecium-shaped debris swim through my view each day. And he tells me enthusiastically that this comes absolutely free with the wisdom package, an honor I have been awarded. I blink. And he says the wisdom package comes with a lot of other free stuff too. But just like life, some people will get more than others. I guess he's 30s, 40s tops, and I am falling in love with him for his gentle way of reminding me I'm getting old and that it's a privilege. I've passed the air puff test, seen retinal scans which look like the red-orange surface of the sun, each with its pinprick dot of optic nerve, thin thread connecting the eye to the dark, ornate theater of the brain where the picture shows of our lives play. I laugh and ask him about knees and knuckles, liver spots, forgetfulness, and to each complaint he answers, wisdom, wisdom, wisdom. We do not know one another's stories, how many each of us has lost, the who or how of it, from war, disease, or fate's unfairness doling out more death to some than others. We give each other's hand a squeeze, let go, and get back to the business of my sight. He swings a heavy black heart suspended from a giant arm in front of me, clicks through pairs of lenses with the careful ticks of a slowing clock. I blink and answer him each time. Clearer, better, thank you. Yes, much clearer now. And I'm going to end with a poem that was also in One Art. And it's a poem of Thanksgiving, which seems like we have to look around, but it's there. There are many, many, many reasons to be thankful. And this is called This Late Thanks. Hickory nuts shake down from shag barks onto blacktop, their leather cases cracked at the seams, releasing the dense center that as a child, I'd try to bust open for food with a hammer against stone. It never worked. My first careful blows revealed an intricate chambered hardness that clenched the meat too tightly for my fingers to pick out. So I'd bring the hammer down like Thor and smash the halves to mush, shot through with broken shell, impossible to eat. Sometimes a truck's weight can't bust a hickory nut's core. Today, they drop atop the asphalt or skitter into ditches where they'll soften and take root, get storm washed into creeks to rot, decay, go around again. For years, I thought I could discover where the sweet spot lives between swift obliteration and slow, patient time. The perfect angle, pressure point, the perfect words to pry wide the small, hard architectures we hold so tight inside, but no such place. Instead, I have this late and quiet thanks for fate or happenstance, or maybe even grace, that any one of us has fallen, broken just enough onto an earth or into hands that give. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks very much. What a heartening evening to be with you all.
Thank you so much, Hayden. Always wonderful to hear you read. And again, thank you for coming out tonight. And thank you to all three of our readers. Let me just make a few quick announcements. So hopefully you can mark your calendars for the next One Art reading, which is scheduled for Sunday, December 8th. A few of our readers are in the audience right now, in fact. Featured poets for Sunday, December 8th, 2 p.m. Eastern. The featured poets will be Heidi Seaborn, who is executive editor of Adroit, Marjorie Maddox, who is with us right now, Erin Murphy, Haley Mitchell Hogan, I think that's how you say Haley's last name, who is editor of Sheila-Na-Gig, Abby E. Murray, who just had a poem in One Art that is amazing and you should definitely go read, and it's Collateral. Yeah, so if everyone wants to unmute and clap, feel free. And then I can stop recording, and if anyone wants to chat for a minute, that's totally fine. We can hang out. So thank you all for being here. And I will put a link in the chat for readings. Yeah.
Shoot. I just saw Robbie's message. We were your post about all the conflicting readings.